Mr. Hess. Again, Adam Hess, our new District 3 representative on the Board of Supervisors.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Good evening, everybody. Let me start with who I am. Matt Ryan just retired after 27 years of public service. I just retired from the Army 1 December. So I wanted to continue my community service, except on a very local level. So this is exactly what I want to do. So with that, I retired, I jumped right in, and here I am. So you guys are the first public meeting I've got to be with, and to be honest, I'm happy to be here, and I'm very glad that you guys are all here. It's not always going to be sunshines and rainbow, but we got this. We got it. About me, I grew up in Flagstaff. My parents moved here after I was born in the Air Force. My dad was in the Air Force. Moved here when I was just under 1 year old back in 1976. My parents are from Phoenix. They're both school teachers, both retired now. My dad was a wrestling coach. My mom finished up. She was a foods teacher. My dad was a metal shop teacher. My mom finished up as a principal. I went to Sonawa High School. I went to elementary school up here. I went to NAU. I did ROTC because I wanted to serve. And then I went into the Army. I was in 3rd Infantry Division during the invasion of Iraq in 2003. So I'm an engineer officer, retired major. That was interesting times. I got out. I was going to be a high school teacher. So I came back to NAU. I was going to work on my master's degree, but I figured out teaching's way too dangerous. So I went back in the Army. And this time I worked in the reserves. I was lucky enough to be in the reserves, but I was the full-time guy. I wasn't there just one weekend a month. My small team and I were there the whole time. And I got to finish up and retired as that. I got to teach NAU for a little bit, ROTC. I was the professor of military science and the assistant professor of military science. I've always been trying to get back here to Northern Arizona. My parents and I, we found 10 acres on Belmont. And we're doing the compound thing. My parents have their own little house. I have my house. We've got a big shop. Loving it, living the dream, just like you guys are out here. So I fought to get back here. And why am I here? I want to help the community. I've told everybody I'm a terrible politician. So I'm not here to be a politician. I'm here to be someone that can help. And if I've been talking to Nancy, been getting all the emails from Larry. Working with the engineers. I started this job January 9th. Yes, January 9th, 24. And here I am. So I really appreciate it. And I look forward to all your comments and questions. With that being said, let's get to that. So what I want to do here tonight is do kind of a Q&A. Not necessarily looking for comments. If you want to give comments, then hit me up afterwards, and my engineers will stay here, and you can give them comments. But I think it's most productive, ask us the questions. We'll try to give you those answers. If we can't give you the answers, we're going to take that back, and I'm going to promise you that I will get you the answers that we can come up with. I don't make many promises. As an Army engineer, we never make promises. Our motto is Essayons. Anybody know what that means? It means let us try. So as an engineer, we always just try to make sure everything is going on, Army engineer. So Essayons, and I'll try to get everything I can for you. And I look forward to this. I'm excited about this. Now, last thing I have before I get into this, it is my son's birthday. So I have to get to his birthday party at Levitate. He's going to be trying to kill him and his hockey brothers on the trampolines. So I got to leave here by 6. So if you have any questions, I can stay a little bit longer. Grandma and Grandpa are paying, so I'll let them pay for everything, and then I'll sweep in there and be the good dad that I am. So with that being said, again, let's keep it short. Let's keep it to questions, and if we don't have an answer, we'll come back to you. We're going to capture all the questions, and then we'll come back, and I will be at the May 16th meeting, if you'll have me. Sir. Keeping it short, who do I have with me? I've got engineers Scott Ogden and John Carr. Okay, Scott is with J.E. Fuller and has over 37 years of experience in the flood risk modeling and mapping, and has been involved with Munds Park Risk Map project since the beginning of 2011 and the Munds Park initial engineering assessment in 2016. John is the engineering supervisor for Coconino County Community Development. He has 10 years experience in the floodplain permitting and management within Coconino County. So what I've got here is probably the biggest two questions, and I'll throw it to my engineers right now. And if you guys can join me on stage, I'd appreciate it. So to Scott, why is floodplain remapping done?
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having us here. We're grateful to have a chance to visit with you. To answer the question, why is floodplain remapping done? Let's talk a little bit about, we'll just talk in Munds Park because that's where we're all at. The original maps that were developed for the Munds Park area in total were originally prepared in 1983. Okay, so that's, well over 30 some odd years ago, 40 years ago. And the technology that was used to prepare those maps was state of the art at the time, but it has been dated. There's been a lot of research, a lot of new science that's come forward. And so a lot of that information is valuable in being able to take another look at what the floodplain delineations are, what the estimations of the peak discharges are, all of those pieces. Topography changes. It's not the same as it was in 1983. There's a lot of changes that are different now. And so those changes in topography all inform how the floodplain, how flooding moves across the surface. So that's another reason that we would look at remapping or updating floodplains. The other probably the third and biggest reason, at least as far as the area that is west of 17, north of 17, up in the Lodge area. When the maps, or when the floodplains were originally delineated, the area east of 17 through the golf course, lowland area up through there, up through Odell Lake, and up into the canyon, was mapped using detailed methodology. So it was the modeling and the calculations were much more rigorous through that area. And out of that, the maps were prepared, and they had actual base flood elevations delineated, so we knew the depths, we knew what the flood elevations would be, and those were put on the maps. The area west and north was delineated with what is called an approximate zone. And basically, for lack of a better description, an approximate zone is just that. It's technically, it's equivalent to just giving an engineer's best guesstimate of where the floodplain might be. There's no analysis behind it. There's no hydraulic analysis. There's no calculations. The topography is used and part of it, but it's based on, I really appreciated seeing that map, the USGS map from 1932 one. Well, the next gen map of that is about a 1970 version, and that 1970 map is what was used to do the floodplain delineations with. Okay, so those maps are compiled. The contours that show where the elevations are, I don't know if you saw the lines or not, but those elevations are determined to a plus or minus 10 to 20 foot of accuracy. Okay, so just kind of get your head around the idea that that mapping accuracy is very broad, depending on the accuracy because of how they were prepared and then the level of detail. The mapping that we've used with this new study is plus or minus 2 feet. So it's much, much, much more accurate than the original accuracy of the floodplain map. You get the delineation, you get the details, you get a lot more information. We also had determined as a part of the deal update was that these approximate zones that were up through here are not appropriate. They're severely underpredicting where the flood risk is by a lot. And if I've got some maps and stuff, and I'd like to load a few things up, but we'll do that more in response to questions. But those are probably the biggest reasons why we would go about doing an update, is to bring the modern technology to update based on newer information, better details, and then get a better depiction of what the flood risk really is. I can give a quick overview.
So one of the other questions that my engineers gave me looking at this was, one of the other major questions was, what is the history of floodplain remapping in Munds Park? So specifically for you guys. So again, thanks.
All right, so we talked a little bit about that. 1983 was the first maps. From the period of 1983 through what is now the current effective floodplain maps dated 2010. So if you went to FEMA or anybody and got the current flood insurance rate maps, that's the term that's used. You'll hear me say firm panel, that's what that's referring to, flood insurance rate map. Those maps from that period of 1983 to 2010, the only change that has been made to those maps is converting them from all paper format to a progression of getting them in a digital format, and then getting them into data that can be published through, anybody familiar with geographical information systems? It's called GIS. It's a mapping tool. It's a digital mapping tool, and it's a way to overlay layers, property boundary, floodplain, topo. You can do all these things with this tool and be able to evaluate properties. And the final step, the last step of the process was FEMA took all of that, the maps that are out there, they got them digitized, and then they went and they published these GIS data sets. Okay, so from 1983 to 2010, the same science and technology and floodplain determination was carried through all the way through. 2010, 2011 is when the county worked with FEMA through a Cooperating Technical Partnership Grant, CTP, and that's when the decision was made to update many of the areas in the county. Munds Park wasn't the only one. Kachina Village, Mountain Air, there were several of these other areas. All of them got an update on the mapping. Okay, so that process then began in 2011 with some mapping, and then we moved through progressions. The study was initially done in 2012, went into FEMA. FEMA took that material, put it into their program. Their program moves slow. Let's just say it moves slow. So they basically took the technical details of the 2012 study and prepared the floodplain maps, the firm panels that are the product that winds up being published. And in that process, they issued a set of new maps. And there was an actual set of maps that came out just like the ones that came out just recently, only that was in 2015. In that period, when they were getting ready to release the maps, we sat down with the county and we were looking at some data that we had that became recently available. The U.S. Geological Survey prepared a whole brand new analysis of some using late science and all the gauge record, and basically prepared some updated, I'm trying to think how to, the regional regression equations. And basically in simple language, they are equations that you can use to estimate peak discharges in various regions, okay? And they completely redid all of this. And when they did that, and we reanalyzed based on those brand new publications from, guys that got 7 or 8 PhDs behind their name, when they put that information out, we started analyzing Munds Park again. And when we were looking at the results, and we're like, wow, the old data isn't good anymore. And we had something that we were like, okay, we need to go back and revisit this. So we pulled all that data in, we pulled all the analysis in, and we reanalyzed the whole study. And the county basically submitted an appeal. Just like the appeal process we had, the county submitted an appeal. And the appeal was to update these maps based on this new data, the new science, and get something that's more accurate. And that's where we went. So then we went through that process, redid, updated, recalculated, did all those things, and then resubmitted a study to FEMA in late 2018. That's when we started having conversations with Larry, because out of that study came some other pieces that's where that 2016 timeframe is where all the conversations we started having at the fire station and started presenting these maps and getting some back input. And there's some other stuff that happened then too that we can talk about. But all of that to say, that study was finished, updated, FEMA reviewed it. Larry mentioned Stantec. So Stantec was the technical reviewer hired by FEMA, contracted by FEMA to do an independent QC, QA control, total, complete in-depth review of all that study. And then once all that was done and approved, then FEMA picked those maps up and went and started getting ready to put the new maps out. It took a bit longer because of an administrative thing internal to FEMA's process, but we finally ultimately wound up with the new maps coming out in July, issuing the new maps in July in 2023. That was when the maps that you've all been seeing, or hopefully you've been seeing, are now out. So it's been a journey. It has been a real journey. So it's been a lot of things, but I will say that the idea has been, I heard several times, we need accuracy. Well, that's what this whole process has been about, is making sure that we're working with the most accurate possible data and maps available to this deal. So that would be the answer, I think, proposed to that second question.
Thank you. At this time, we'll open it up to some questions. So again, if you have questions, wait till the microphone comes to you so they can record it on voice. So we'll start at the back, I guess.
Hi, I'm Brandon. Some of you may know me. So just from what I got from your little spiel right there, wouldn't it be safe to say then that when the county put in our infrastructure for flooding along the I-17 in the town of Munds Park, that they are also working off of old, outdated data, and that now there is some sort of onus maybe on the county to start to revisit what they have done, culverts, drainage, and stuff like that around Munds Park, seeing how they had old data when they created what they did to mitigate the situation? Am I correct? Right?
All right, so talk a little bit about ownership, okay? ADOT is responsible for ADOT. As a matter of fact, there was probably very little county interaction with whatever was in. So all the ADOT facilities are theirs. There was probably some review because there's a floodplain connection with some of it, but the reality is that's ADOT. That's ADOT's realm, that's their stuff, okay? And the ADOT culverts and structures and everything are huge in the movement of the floodwater around here, okay? Because the flows come up out of the mountain, back up here and over here.
I understand.
Okay.
But would they have not used peak discharges to figure out the size of culverts needed?
They would have, yes, they would have. And they're probably, when that freeway was built, it was what, 70s?
Yeah, but those culverts then would not reach the peak discharge, then those culverts for today, according to your study, would not be sufficient for that new peak discharge, correct?
I can't speak to that because I don't have the data.
Because it's true?
I don't have the data that ADOT designed. I don't know what they designed those culverts for peak
Okay,
discharge
but then,
for.
not worrying about the highway, because I don't live on the highway. I actually live over by the golf course.
Okay,
The infrastructure that was used in Munds Park then was used with that old data, correct?
it was used with what's physically on the ground.
What was physically available, correct? Like, that's what I'm saying, like, so then, that's my question. Like, in my area, I don't even have, my next door neighbor doesn't even have a culvert. They don't have drainage, they don't have anything. Their front yard is typically in about 6 inches to a foot of water every year. I have talked to the county about it. Nothing has been done about it. It's still that way today. We can go there right now. And that's what I'm saying, is that there's areas that I think the county has some liability on, especially seeing that now there's updated information that I'd imagine that you could say that maybe our culverts, our drainage, and other things that could be, as some other gentleman said, maybe used to help us, could maybe be looked at before we just say, hey, you're going to pay this money and do these things, when the infrastructure isn't sound anyways, because the technology that was used was outdated. So then so therefore all of our infrastructure is outdated and undersized for the potential, correct? Like, I mean, that's what I gathered from what you said, is that now with new technology, the reason why we update is because there's new technology, and therefore we need to make changes on our end. But then I think there would need to be some changes then maybe in what happens for our floodwaters and how those are mitigated through the county.
And that is step two. That
what-
is step two.
Oh, step
Okay,
two,
so
we never heard it.
think about this in a way. How many of you would be sitting here having this conversation 5 years ago? Because you're really worried about the floodplain.
We never-
No, I want to answer. I want to, and the reason that I'm asking that question is because until this study came out and until it exposed the inadequate flood risk or the extra flood risk in the areas, nobody cared.
Yeah, for sure, I agree, right? I live in
So what changed?
So the study changed. That's what my question is that it seems that, and I think some other gentleman that was up there said it, the only thing is to make the people of Munds Park, us, just, the solution is, hey, you have to pay flood insurance and deal with this, but doesn't seem to be any solution about how we can maybe solve this and make it better.
So I don't want to speak for the county, but I know that, okay, the first part of this, you identify the risks. So we have done that. We've got we know where the risks are. We know it's been identified. The second part now is, what can we do about it? And that process is still on the table and coming, but it would be poor judgment to not put those maps into effect now if we truly believe that's where the flood risk is. Because people are going to start building, and a project that can fix the magnitude of the regional kind of situation that we're talking about here, it's not a driveway culvert. It's not, you could build 1,000 driveway culverts and they're not going to fix it. So the kind of fixes that we're talking about that can help mitigate or at least reduce some of this flood risk are 5 years out. They're a ways out. You got to get funding. You got to identify. They're well out, and I'm not trying to. I hope I'm not saying anything that's. The county is very aware of this, and we've actually already done an analysis on this one time already. There was what we call an initial engineering assessment done on the Munds Park area after those 2016 maps came out, or the 2015 maps came out, because the county recognized we need to get out here and see if we can figure out if there's some reasonable regional flood fixes that could be done. And that information is published. It's available on the county website. We looked at basins. We looked at dams. We looked at channelization, all kinds of different things. What came out of that process was anything that did any kind of a meaningful fix was in the order of, $60 to more $1 million kinds of projects. They're huge. because of the size of the regional flooding. The one project that got elevated to a more detailed outlook was the ultimate outflow for Munds Park. Okay, so is everybody aware, everybody knows where the sanitation district is and the water treatment plant, wastewater treatment plant? Right there at I-17, everything that drains to Munds Park goes out underneath I-17 through it's a bridged crossing, but there's a channel in there. And it drains and it ultimately goes down into Oak Creek Canyon. What we looked at was, and somebody else brought it up, which I'm impressed, that's good foresight, is the idea of could we not channelize that, drop the invert, push more water out, like create something, get the water out, get the timing, move more water out so it can lower the water surface that it's impounding in the areas upstream. And we looked at that. And indeed, there was a possible solution in going underneath ADOT, channelizing that out, opening that up a little bit, and trying to get more water flushed out in the flood. The problem is what we push out more became about a 1,500 CFS at a 100-year level increase in the peak discharge because we're pushing more water out that then caused problems downstream, where that water wound up in Oak Creek and at that confluence. And now you're causing flooding issues down there that technically weren't there before. So based on that adverse impact evaluation, the county stepped back and said, well, we can't do that to our neighbors. That's not what we're going to do. So that got shelved, but it's not completely dead. If we can figure out a way now to maybe combine that with maybe some on-site storage up in the watershed somewhere, it still might be a viable option. But we haven't gone there yet.
You got another question?
I just wondered two things. Have you ever seen, so where I live now, the new map will come right, close by. And so I was thinking, well, if the land isn't managed and the culverts aren't figured out or the drainage or whatever, all of this, then maybe in 5 or 10 years, I'll now be in a floodplain because it's it's just gonna get higher and higher and higher, yeah. So what's the next action for our community? Obviously you have motivated people. So we've started, you have the new maps, we now know the new risk. What's the next action for the community is the first question. The second question is, have you ever seen a map go the other direction where you fix it and say, oh, good, they're not in a floodplain anymore?
Can I address the second question? Okay, I'm going to address the second question. Absolutely yes, all the time. And the reality is that, okay, these maps, when they go, they're not, if a solution is brought forward that meets all the requirements and be done, and it also reduces the flood risk, then what will be done with that solution is a package submittal to FEMA under what is called their letter of map change process, okay? It's basically the same thing that the appeal process works now, only it's just post-publishing of the map. So you would submit all your supporting technical data, all of this stuff that substantiates why that floodplain redelineation can now be different. You submit that to FEMA, it goes through their review, all of that comes back. If everything meets all of the regulations and the requirements for the National Flood Insurance Program, and everything comes together right, the maps get changed. And now all of a sudden the floodplain is changed to wherever the new resulting floodplain becomes. The first part of that question, I don't know, John, you want to take that?
Yeah, I was going to say that just to extend on what you spoke about earlier about the initial engineering assessment, which looked at several different options and did a cost-benefit analysis. The Board of Supervisors has expressed an interest in maybe taking another look at those from a cost-benefit standpoint. So that'd be kind of the next step, the mitigation step.
So we would like get involved with the county board of supervisors, is that what you're saying?
Oh, okay. Well, then, basically, I would say that the Board of Supervisors would be looking for direction from experts in our industry and looking at, potential projects and seeing whether they pencil out or not, whether spending, millions of dollars, lowering the water just a little bit is worth it, or what is the most practical project.
So stay informed, and then maybe are there grants that as a community we could apply for with the Bureau of Land Management? We can't hear you. I'm just saying, like, are there grants that the community could apply for or
Yes.
partner with or piggyback on?
Yes, there are. As with any grant program, especially, the typical ones, FEMA has a couple. FEMA has actually like 3 that could apply out here. The challenge is, with every grant that FEMA issues, or most federal agencies for that matter, NRCS has some grants, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, they're a branch of the USDA. So you've got FEMA, NRCS, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers sometimes has some dollars they'll put out there. The bottom line with almost every one of those grants, without fail, short of a congressional push from the very top through, is a project must be able to meet a benefit cost ratio and generate a number of 1, which basically says that the benefit of that project outweighs the cost by a factor of 1 or more, okay? What's difficult in some of these projects is when you're talking about a price tag of $60 million, $50 million, $60 million, you have to demonstrate that that $60 million outlay is going to offset more than a $60 million cost with not doing it. There might be that. I mean, we might have that. There's a lot of impacted facilities, both homes, businesses, residences, the sanitation district. There's a lot of loss that could be generated in a benefit cost analysis. But we have to get to a point where we find something that's a reasonable fix, and then take the conversation from there. But yes, there are grants.
Larry had his hand up first.
Okay. All right, John. I'd like to kind of put some of what you're saying in layman's term. You talk a lot about generalizations. You talk in, this is my opinion, you talk in circles. And I'm going to tell the folks that are out here right now what you're trying to say. You're trying to give them some hope. But if you really believed in anything you said, you would have stopped this process, because I've asked you over and over to stop it. I've asked you to have the work reviewed. You send me back answers. No. Evasive answers. We can't. You don't believe, and I don't believe for 1 minute, that you're going to do anything different than this. You're going to somewhere around September and October, from what I've got from the Zoom meeting and from the Board of Supervisors meeting, that what's going to happen is these maps are going to be made from you as okay, and then they're going to be put in a process that for 6 months, which I don't understand, something to do with a governmental thing, that ADWR or whoever is going to look at it to see where they can get involved and spend time or whatever the heck they do. And then somewhere around the 1st of 2025, we're going to have these maps. I don't believe anything you're saying in terms of giving these people any hope, because if any of it were true at all, you would have stopped this a long time ago. And if you want to, tell these people right now that you'll stop it.
Okay.
Excuse me?
Okay, we got it.
I wasn't finished.
I know, I got you, Larry. We're trying to keep this going forward in a positive formation. So.
Well, in other words, if I say something that doesn't sound
No, you
positive
can-
to you, you're going to
No,
stop me from talking?
I think you've brought up a lot of things that I would like to answer, at least, to try.
No, I'm talking to John right now. I want
correct.
him to respond. Is he willing to stop this process and allow what this gentleman back here said? Are you willing to stop this and respond to the gentleman back here that had good ideas and look into possibilities of resolving some of this? You know as well as I do that you won't even talk to ADOT. You went to ADOT, but you won't force the issue about what's going on the freeway.
Well, isn't that the county's job?
Will you stop the process and give us some hope? That's what I'm asking for.
Just like he said, isn't that, I take that one, Larry.
I asked John. No,
I
I
know.
asked John. I'd like his answer.
Correct,
Please
but-
have John answer.
But who would talk to ADOT? Would it be the guy we hired to do the mapping, or would it be the county?
I can answer that because
Correct, and we know the answer.
I wrote the director of ADOT.
Sure.
And the response I got back was after, when I wrote, I got an answer from John that said he was.
100%.
What?
100%, I'm with you 100%.
Well, let me finish, because when you do that, you
Okay,
mess
go
up
ahead.
my
I was
thought
just trying to
process.
show you that I'm
You're
going with
doing
you.
it again. Okay. I'm asking John, I asked
Okay.
John if they had ever talked to ADOT. They said no. So I wrote ADOT. I wrote the director. Then all of a sudden, the county said, we'll talk to ADOT. Then I got an answer back that was a word salad. I have no idea what they told ADOT. I was told at the very beginning in 2018, they don't talk to ADOT because they're another government agency. And then in 2023, I was told, basically, you go talk to ADOT. So I did, and then the county talked to ADOT, but they never told me what they said to ADOT.
Okay.
And I got a word salad. So all of this, so I'm asking John, I'd like an answer. Are you willing to stop this and look at ways to solve our problems here in Munds Park? Yes or no? No, I'm asking John. He's the engineer. You're an independent contractor.
No, he's the hired
by-
independent. He
by
works
that.
for the county.
Okay, I got it flipped then.
Oh, okay. That's why I was confused, because I was wondering why you were asking him as the contract. You're asking, that makes sense.
This individual right here works for who?
J.E. Fuller.
Are you Scott? Yes. Okay, you're Scott, and then you're John. Okay.
Yeah.
I apologize, I got you confused. But here's where I'm confused. You've done all the talking. Where does this county stand in terms of stopping this process? I'd like to hear from the county if that's the case. And I apologize I have met you, both of you, in the past, but it was 2018. You sat on my porch.
No, that's where I was confused, because I was like.
I screwed
that's-
that up. I apologize.
Yeah, that's why I was trying to jump in,
screwed
because
that
I
up.
was confused too.
Right.
That's why I wasn't trying to be rude to you, sir.
Okay.
I was just trying to figure out.
That's fine. Well,
Okay.
now we know. So let's hear from the county. Are they willing to stop this?
You have an answer? Okay, go ahead.
I don't have the authority to stop the study. I don't have the authority to stop the map from continuing on its progression.
Who has the authority?
It's in FEMA's hands right now.
Well, who is FEMA?
Federal.
What is this, another thing like we don't talk to ADOT? We can't talk to ADOT, they're another
No,
government agency?
no,
So why don't you talk to FEMA? If you believe what you heard out here and what we've told you is a real problem, and the individual back there articulated it very well, that he was basically saying, you got data and problems that basically we could look at what could be
Give him a
done
mic.
for a change and then do the study. So why not make change and then do the study? Why jam these flood maps down our throats and then tell everybody, you got to go fix this? This stuff you're talking about, and this is the reason I got you confused. Scott, you're the independent contractor, and you're talking about grant money? That guy right there is a guy that's supposed to talk about grant money. I listened to the Board of Supervisors meeting, and they told us in Munds Park in the Board of Supervisors meeting we were under 8 foot of water, and they really can't help us because we're so low on the totem pole that they have no time for us. Anybody who wants to listen to the Board of Supervisors meeting, you were there. Basically, that's what.
Sure. That's the one I was at?
Well, it was the last Board of
Sure,
Supervisors meeting.
okay.
Were you at the last Board of Supervisors meeting?
Yeah, I'm just clarifying that it was that meeting. That's all.
Right. So why do I get an answer from the county that says, well, it's FEMA? Well, you guys took the money from FEMA. You took their money and you did the study. And if you believe that something should be stopped and something should happen to relook at this thing, Why are you letting this train roll down the hill and plow over everybody?
Can I jump in?
No, I'm asking the county again.
Well, I am the county supervisor.
I know, but I'm still asking the county.
But
John
I'm-
Carr. I'm
I'm-
asking John Carr. John Carr is the guy that I've been writing to since 2018.
Can I answer the question?
No, I'm still asking. I'd like to answer from John Carr. Please, you can, but let John answer it
Exactly,
first.
that's why I want to jump in here. Reason I'm here is because of what we asked for. I've talked to you many times. The reason I'm here, I'm the new guy. I want to get in there. I want to get us fresh knowledge. The questions he asked, I'm going to take those and we're going to staff those and we're going to run it to ground. That's my
Yeah,
my
but
job.
you're going to still issue the maps. Don't
It's-
play us for fools.
Correct.
You issue those maps,
we're
we're screwed.
Okay.
That's the bottom line. Anything else you say is nothing but pacifying
Got it.
people.
Well,
You made your,
no,
you made your point. I think Nancy is next, if I may.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, now, from what I'm understanding is we go through this mitigation process, and who is going to be paying for the engineers? Like, for example, what I have been proposing to you folks is that we cannot have this dam and reservoir back that Hattie Munds created in 1902. But what we have going on behind here, the Schuster's property, the RV park, is we have Munds Wash West. Is it Munds Wash West or Munds Wash Canyon West or whatever? Okay, so anyway, if the property owners, and I did talk to the Schusters, or at least one of them, and they support this idea, and they have a lot of property to dig up and make the wash deeper and wider on their property. The RV park just did that with their property. And then there's a few other properties that are deeper and wider, just a couple more that would need to be done. Could that act as a reservoir? Now, I understand you're talking about a $60 million project, but those are private properties, you know, and that would definitely cut the price of doing something like you're talking about. I mean, obviously, you still have to have a dam somewhere, and I understand there's a lot of issues with that, but you could use nature. You could use boulders and rocks and stagger dam-like, something like dams along Munds Wash before it hits Oak Creek. You have the reservoir, which is our properties, which is going to hold a massive amount of water, not all of it, obviously, because we're talking massive, massive water, but we do need to get rid of that obstacle that is creating a lot of this problem, but we don't want to impact Oak Creek. So I'm curious, if this is a good idea, when does it go from it's worth exploring to paying money to have an engineer look at it? I mean, when do we take some of these good ideas to the next phase?
Okay, so just so I can make sure that they're understand for that. So the question is, if we add some changes, will that be impactful? Is that, and when would it happen?
I think that we got a really good idea.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're bringing back the dam and reservoir, just different.
Yeah, I'm just restating
And
what you.
I'm just trying to figure out when it becomes a good idea.
Okay.
To, you know what, let's put some money into it. Oh, she has it. When do we put
Okay.
money into it and have an engineer check it out? Make sure we're not causing the adverse impact to Oak Creek, yada, yada.
Go ahead.
As far as the timing of that, and I don't want to make any promises either, that will be an extensive period. I mean, we're looking at several years of doing an evaluation of what would fit, what would meet that cost-benefit ratio, and wouldn't have a negative impact on Oak Creek Canyon.
So it still takes years.
Yes.
So then I guess going back to Brandon's statement, I don't know if he's still here. At what point, if we can't do those bigger projects, when can you start, at the county, start working on some of these smaller projects that you can do that are not $60 million or so?
Well, and that's where I'm not in the position to talk about smaller projects or what the financial opportunities might be for the county to help step in. I would defer to Supervisor Hess, but I would like if, you could step up just a second, Sean. There was a question or comment before about, could you take the microphone back to, or Sean, come up? I was just following up on we're forcing things down your throats, is what I've heard. Sean, could you give just a little background information of the outreach that we've done, including the radio, television, and the outreach meetings?
Sure, yeah. To speak about, the process that we've engaged in this floodplain remapping, Scott gave a pretty thorough history of how we've gotten to this point. And as he mentioned, these last firms, FEMA gave us these last maps in July. At that point, we kicked off a process of trying to engage this community. What we did to engage this community so that y'all could get involved with the appeals process, so you could be aware of what was being released, we sent 3,000 postcards to every single property in Munds Park. On those postcards, we included information about upcoming public meetings, as well as links to our website where you'd be able to find more information and recordings of those public meetings. We then hosted 3 public meetings, including one that was virtual, so that folks who were out of town or weren't full-timers here could attend those meetings. We sent another 508 letters to every single property that was either within the floodplain or would be newly mapped into the floodplain or newly mapped out of the floodplain. We then sent a series of press releases to get information about these public meetings and the upcoming appeal process published in all kinds of news outlets, including the Pinewood News. I know the Pinewood News published several of our notices and several of our press releases about this process and about the meetings that we hosted. We also received publication in the AZ Daily Sun. We received publication, of course, on our website, on FEMA's website, and frankly, every radio station within 100 miles here. So we had an extensive public outreach process in which we tried to get contact with everybody in Munds Park so that you all could be aware of this process, that you all could be engaged with the public appeals process, so that y'all would have time to engage in the appeals process, and that you knew when that process began. And it began on January 24th, 2024, right? And we have been notifying and engaging this community for over 7 months now. Now, if folks, if you didn't get the mail, if you didn't listen to the news, if you didn't get any of that information, I'm sorry, but we did a lot to make sure that folks were as engaged as possibly could be. To that end, I think what you were trying to get at is, this is not something in which we're trying to force down anyone's throat. We have held the highest standard of democratic process to invite this community into this process so that y'all could be informed, y'all could be engaged, and y'all could be organized. And I think furthermore, our very presence at this meeting should be telling to that end. For the 3 public meetings and the thousands of mailers that we've sent, we got invited to come back down again on a Saturday, no less, and we did. We came here so that we could answer your questions, so that we could be engaged, so that we could try and be helpful to you as process. So if that's forcing it down your throats, well, I don't know how we would do it more gently.
Answer that question.
So, sure, happily. So the way that it works, because this is FEMA's process, right? The moment that FEMA released the maps to us, we were essentially on the clock, because we wanted to make sure that the moment FEMA was ready, we were able to, kind of initiate the process there. So the timing, yes, less than ideal. And that's part of the reason that we offered virtual meetings so that people could be, could join in if they weren't full-timers. It's also part of the reasons that we sent out mailers to both, properties here in Munds Park as well as listed property owners, meaning that, if it was impacting a property in Munds Park, those folks would have received a letter in Munds Park as well as a letter at whatever the ownership address was as well. So I hear you. Less than ideal for a community that is largely active in the summer, but we were beholden by the timelines in which were provided to us from FEMA, and we made every effort possible to make that outreach accessible to everybody.
I would just add that the outreach wasn't perfect, and I fully admit that. There's been a couple residents that have reached out to us and say, hey, we didn't get this notice. So, again, we're not perfect.
Actually, if I could make one other note on that, I apologize. One thing to note as well, and this was included on the postcards that we sent out, is, the public meeting, the virtual public meeting that we hosted back in September. We recorded it, just as we're doing with this meeting, and we have hosted that on our website. So if you're interested in seeing that public meeting or seeing any of the other information that we've posted, if you Google Coconino County Flood Control District, Munds Park, you'll get the Munds Park dedicated page that we've hosted since August at this point, which has all our pre-recorded, all the recorded public meetings, all the information about these maps, all the information about the appeals process, everything you could want. And then when this meeting is recorded and finalized, that will be posted on that page as well early next week. So I highly recommend that you all take a visit to that page. You'll find a lot of useful information there.
So if I may, so the way we're looking at it is we have to have the maps, as you stated. Was it Brandon? Okay. As you stated, we have to have those maps and then know what the problems are, as you stated, and then we can start looking at the process. Now, understand, the county's job is what? Is to make sure we don't look at property costs, but we look at the lives and the citizens of this county. That's our first priority. Does that make sense?
This is like new rules on Bill Maher's program, which I'm sure all of you have watched. New rule, if you want to speak, you will stand, and we will get a microphone to you. One exception, Sandy, you don't have to stand.
That's favoritism.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. Back to the mapping that you said is new technology, and the maps came out in when? What was the year again?
Originally in 2015 and then re-released in 2023.
And how long were the maps used before then? Like, how many maps has that program made? And how accurate are they?
Oh, you mean how many maps have been created with the software that we use?
Yeah,
the modeling software?
Yeah, I'm not asking it very well, but basically, there's other areas that have been mapped out, right? So how accurate has these programs been?
As far as predicting the floodplains?
Yes.
The new two-dimensional technology, which is what we use with this one, has been really accurate.
So can you name a big flood that it's predicted?
We just had a flood where we had done a mapping project down in Maricopa County, and it was up off of the oh gosh, my mind just went blank. Riata Pass Wash. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, but there's a wash that comes down through there, and they had a fairly substantial flood. And the 2D mapping that was produced in there dialed it in like really, really close.
So what?
And we also have the ability to, when we have, okay, like, how many were around in 2015? When the east side over here was inundated almost all the way up to Pinewood Boulevard. Yeah, so you remember this, all right? That's a bit of a validation in and of itself. That water doesn't get up to Pinewood Boulevard without creating the backwater to get there. And that was like one of the storms that we went back and looked at as a validation that this technical thing, this model is putting out some reasonable results, given that the discharge from that 2015 storm was about equivalent to about a 25-year flood, 30-year flood.
Is there a percentage, like, would you say it's 80% accurate, 90% accurate?
Okay.
I'm just
You're
trying to-
mixing, all right, so you're mixing probabilities, and to be able to put that kind of a statement on this is, it's not appropriate, first of all, because of the unknowns. Like if we had a gauge at every point where water came into the creek, or into the floodplain. And we could drop those gauges directly into the model. And then we have the gauge at the outlet that we could compare that to. And we had high water marks everywhere along the way where we had validated the deal and rerun that as a calibration and be able to demonstrate that it's in, then you can put a stamp of confidence that's in the 90 to 100%. We don't have that kind of data. We just don't have that kind of data.
So we don't.
So we're using probabilities and statistics.
So we don't really know how accurate these maps are. It's just a really good educated guess?
No, it's more than an educated guess, way more than an educated guess. But it's
Okay.
based on technology that I will tell you this, if those watersheds drain off to the magnitude of discharges that we're looking at coming off of there for the storm modeled, I would bet money that the actual accuracy of the mapping is very close.
Okay, and just one more question. So I think Munds Park, the community can wrap their mind around, we're in a flood zone, or a big portion of it's in a flood zone. The problem is that you're saying that we're in a really big flood zone, and there's no solution to it other than you're just going to pay a lot more money in your insurance and you're going to lose property value. That's all the county's given us. Now, I spoke to Lucinda, and I'm paraphrasing, but basically what she said, with all the criteria that FEMA requires, and all the criteria to get a grant, it would be an act of God for us to really get any help. That there's too many other problems that are bigger than what Munds Park has. And basically, don't expect solutions because there's no money. And the probability of getting FEMA to agree to any of the grant money is like non-existent. She named one program that I can't remember what the project was, but it took them 40 years to get grants to help with their floodplain issue. I wish I could tell you who it was. I can't remember. But basically, the hope you're giving us is Lucinda saying it's non-existent. The government is not on our side in this area. Now, we pay a lot of money in taxes. I own my own business. I pay the employer side. I pay the employee side. It's a ridiculous amount of money. And you're saying, hey, too bad. It's just your life.
We had someone who wanted to speak back here. Tim?
I think.
Go ahead.
My name is Gary Cole, and I'm just interested in the role of everybody. A lot of questions are coming at you about solutions, and that's, that'd be great if you had any, but clearly that's not really what your job was. I'm assuming it was to make this map, and the purpose of the map is to increase the pool of flood insurance, right? So, I mean, really? Well, okay, but the people that fund the flood insurance are the ones that look to have that map include more people to, improve the. Were you charged at all with finding solutions when you did the?
Not within the FEMA mapping process.
Okay.
No, that's not in the purview of the FEMA floodplain mapping process for the National Flood Insurance Program. Mm-hmm. That's not what that is for.
Right.
What it was for was what we talked about at the very, very beginning, and that's to update the maps with the better technology, the better information, the better data, and get the flood risk squared away.
And increase the pool of people paying flood insurance.
No, it isn't. That is not the goal. I guarantee you it's not the goal. It is not what it's, there's no goal stated in that anywhere.
Well, I'm delighted to hear that.
It's just, that's not the goal.
Stand up. Stand up if you want to speak.
I think, oh.
So when I got my letter with the map, because I knew, I built my house in 2009, finished in 2010, I knew I was in a flood zone. My mother bought this property in 1968. It's never been flooded, ever. And my lot was 4 feet, 5 feet below the road. I had it built up. So my question is, I went to my insurance agent to ask how to buy flood insurance, because this is all new to me. And he said, oh, we don't handle that. It's all handled through FMLA. So then he explained to me it has to do with how high your house is, all these other things. How do you even figure out how much you would pay for that? And there's nowhere you can go to find out. Is there where do you go?
So there are places to get an estimation of what your flood
And what places are
insurance
these?
place. If you go to FloodSmart, all one word, FLOODSMART.gov, that is a site where there is resources to enter in. Basically, you enter in your address,
Well,
and it will give you an estimation of what your flood premiums are. The other thing that you can do is contact your insurance agent.
I did, and he
But-
told me I have to go through FMLA. They don't handle it, they don't have anything to do with it.
So then you go to them. That's the, I don't have that data. It's on the website.
The thing
It is
of it
on,
is,
if you go to the
I
website,
don't-
on county's website, all of the stuff with regard to the risk map, the new insurance, all of the requirements, everything, resources, it's all up there.
I get that, but
Okay.
my question is, how do I know? Because I was under the understanding from my insurance agent, it's based on how high your house sits above this questionable flood. And I have no idea how to figure that out. I don't know how to measure any of that. Do they have insurance agents that come out and do that for you?
There is a document that you can have prepared called an elevation certificate
By who?
by a surveyor, a registered surveyor.
Okay, when I had my property built, I don't know why this happened, but I was told that I had to have my property surveyed. And it was right when I started building, the county stopped the build because I don't recall exactly what happened. Nobody in Flagstaff was competent enough or capable of doing my survey or refused to. I brought someone up from Phoenix. He produced a 65-page report with aerial shots, all pictures, all this stuff explaining, my survey. I gave it he mailed a copy to the county, and when I called 2 weeks later, I said, did you get it? And they said, oh, yeah. I go, can I start building again? And they said, oh, sure, we've never seen anything like this before. This is the first time we've seen anything this detailed. So that just tells me the incompetency of the county.
As far as getting flood insurance quotes, there's a new process that FEMA is doing. It's called Risk Rating 2.0, and it's kind of talks about what you're talking about. They use, if you would just call in and you put in your address, I believe it's that website that Scott had, and it'll give you a quote. Because I did this last summer, because I live in Flagstaff and I'm in the Burn area, so I had to buy flood insurance. And so basically, they do it based on the information they have in geographic information systems, information that they have online. So it's not going to be real specific to your house. So if your house is built up enough, or because your house was built up, you could get an elevation certificate that would improve that rating. But their starting point is based on a number of things, like you said, the height above the curb, which there aren't too many in Munds Park, and then it's also proximity to the flood source. And it's not so much dictated by flood zones. Flood zones, any property that's put into a flood zone, there is the mandatory flood insurance requirement, and a lot of other insurance companies would require that, may require that, but not all of them. Does that answer your question?
This is all very confusing to me, and I don't understand it. And nobody has any answers. There's no solutions. We're just throwing this information, and then I feel like I'm told to go get insurance. So I don't know whether I should get insurance or not. I don't know what to do. I've never had a flood in anywhere near my house. So do I take the chance of not getting insurance? Do I have a deadline to get this insurance because of what's going on? I don't know any of this.
There is, I wouldn't call it a deadline, but when the maps become effective, for the first year, there's a discounted price to incentivize people to buy flood insurance. So there is that out there. But as far as your specific details, if we could follow up after the meeting and I could look at your specific case, we have an expert, Bob Bender, who knows quite a lot about flood insurance, and he was out of town and didn't make this. I would reach out to him and help get a good answer for you, if that would help. Thank you.
I think the gentleman in the back, yellow shirt still? Yeah.
I'm sorry. There you go.
You got to stand up.
Well, I've stood up a couple of times. So, my name's Steve Lemons. I'm a property owner in the floodplain. Probably always have been. But with these new maps coming out, even more of my property is now in the floodplain. So, are you expecting bigger floods than what we've seen in the past 50, 100 years coming down in the future? Or, you know, are you thinking climate change, making heavier storms, heavier snowfalls? In my experience, living where I live, we've had Munds Park Wash become a raging river. And the water has gone out onto the land, but it has never surpassed a certain point, at least on my property and my neighbor's property. And at the time they said, this is a 500-year flood. So I don't know if you're expecting more floods in the future, bigger floods in the future. And are you kind of turning all this over to FEMA? And FEMA's going to say, well, you know, I don't want to. So that's kind of my question. I mean, but these new maps, they are what they are. But are you expecting more weather than normal?
From a statistical standpoint, analyzing the data that's available to us, you have not seen that 100-year flood in this area yet.
So
Doesn't mean it can't happen, it means you have not seen it.
To 2024, 1924, did they have a 100-year flood in the past 100 years?
So let's get a clarification on what 100-year really means, okay? Because it's important. In the world of what we're talking about, when we talk about a 100-year storm, the reality is it is a storm that has a 1% probability of being equaled or exceeded in any given year. So it's not, I got my magic 100-year, I'm good for 100 years. That's not it at all. You could have 3 100-year, 1% probability storms occur in the same year. It's about statistics. It's about taking, so you go out and you get all the rain gauge data and you collect the rain gauge data that's been collected in that watershed for, I don't know, however many years, 100 years plus. And you run statistical analysis on those gauges and you come back and say, okay, this amount of rainfall has a 1% probability of occurring or being equaled or exceeded in any given year, based on the history of the rainfall over 100 years. Now, for peak discharges, flows, now we're talking about actually water surface elevations, we do have a gauge. There's a gauge that Yavapai County maintains just on the outlet of the canyon here, right at the downstream side of ADOT. And that gauge had, at the time when we did the 2018 update, we had 25 years of record. That gauge has been in place and recording for 25 years. And so we were able to take those data and run them through a statistical analysis, just like the statistical analysis on the precipitation data, and come up with what might be that 1% probability storm. We compared what we modeled to that statistical analysis on that gauge, and the discharges were within 1%. And I'm going to be quite frankly honest. When I saw that, I'm like, back to the drawing board. That can't be right, because they're never that close. They're never that close. Hydrology is, we like to think we're that smart, but it's not this super exact science that we'd like to hope it is. But 10%, plus or minus 10%, 20%, that's good. We're in the range. We know that we're looking at something real.
So you're thinking that a big flood's coming.
I'm thinking that there is a potential for a flood out there that you have not seen yet.
So,
and you mentioned climate change. Let me just talk a little bit about that. All right. I'm not a climate change drumbeater. I will confess that right off the top. There's not enough science, in my opinion, at the ground level to really make application. But generally what is being seen is a shift from summertime, a generalization of summertime convective storms to seeing more precipitation in the form of rain coming during the winter months, in addition to snowfall events, okay? Every flood of record that is of any significance recorded on that gauge, in the Yavapai County gauge, occurred in the winter, sometime between November and February, which tells me that this area is subject to flooding, is most subject to flooding during wintertime events. When there's snow in the watershed's frozen, or you get some snow and it's starting to melt off, and then you get that rainstorm that pockets on and just drops water on water, basically. Your watershed's already wet, it's already saturated, and now you got rain on snow and it's coming off. And telling you, it can potentially be
and
a
I
real
understand that. I'm just thinking that, so the maps are going to be issued, and they are what they are.
Yes.
But to come up with solutions, because that's what people, when trouble comes, the first, well, what can we do? Mm-hmm. And so ADOT would have to raise I-17 higher. Well, that's a lot of money. Culverts have to be made bigger. All these different things have to happen, and the county would get involved in that, and it would come out of taxes. And it almost seems to me at a certain point, some government agency might step in and go, you can't live on your property anymore. And that is a problem, to where there are no solutions, and you haven't seen the big flood yet. I don't know, you can't be there anymore. Well, and Kachina Village and Mountain Air and Munds Park, all these little communities, there's something else underlying going on. So you gotta be able to offer, and the government moves really slow. It just seems like you're trying to, because my history, my data, if you will, I can stand on my front porch and I know what the weather's doing and it just seems like, somebody's making a bigger deal than what they should.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming out. Really appreciate it. My name is Tom Lugasak, and I'm the administrative assistant here at the church. You said a couple of things that I don't agree with. Being on the west side here and being involved in this church since 2005, we have always worried about floods and flood insurance and what's happening back here in our ditch and all. Number one, way back in 2010, I talked to our insurance agent, and he suggested that we self-insure instead of buying flood insurance. Because at that time, we were looking at our fellowship hall down here being flooded out. And we figure in 2010, it would cost us about $10,000 to replace the floor and part of the drywall according to the old maps. That would be $5,000 a year, and we figured we could fix that for $5,000 a year, so we decided to self-insure. With the new maps coming out, where you guys are standing, let's see, the water would be up to your waist up there.
No,
Okay.
it won't. I don't know where that number came from, but it's incorrect. The 2.5 feet is somewhere at the lowest point in the parking lot out here. Your building, maybe a half a foot in here.
I was told that it was 8 feet.
No. I don't know where you're getting that information, but it's not true.
Okay.
And the only way that I could tell you, or the county can tell you with a reasonable assurity of just exactly how much water you might see, is to put a elevation on that floor and compare to what the water surface elevations are. But just the quick analysis I did from the mapping and the base data we have, I don't know where that's coming from. It's maybe about a half a foot, because you got a good step here where you come up into the building from the parking lot. The parking lot depth right adjacent to this building in here is somewhere on the order of a foot to a foot and a half.
Okay, so it's not going to affect the sanctuary at all here, huh?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that, but it's not going to be 2 feet. It's not going to be 3 feet. It's not going to be 4 feet.
Okay.
Any water is not good.
All right.
I'm here. I hear you.
Well,
flooding is bad, and it's not
What I'm
good.
getting from this, from 2.5 hours of talking and all, is there's a problem here, and nobody's come up with any solutions at all. Nobody, not the county, not the state, not federal. If we had to, I'd get 10 or 12 guys out here and we get a shovel and start digging a ditch back there if we had to. We could do that.
But can you prove to me that ditch that you dig is actually going to do what you want it to do? And how are you going to do that? That's the question I would ask this entire group. If you don't think that the maps are correct, what is correct? And how can you substantiate that to a technical nature that if you came back and somebody came around and decided the big flood happened, somebody got flooded, and they said, well, they said it was going to be this deep. And you could stand before them and say, here's my analysis, here's why. That is what I would suggest that's why there's an appeal process. If you think that the data is flawed, Mr. Herring has said repeatedly he thinks the data is flawed, but he has not submitted any technical analysis that says why.
Then the deadline for the institution of these maps being applied to our area should be postponed.
Good point. We need to have somebody else speak for 1 minute maximum.
Let's get something straight here, because you're pointing fingers at me. We're not talking about double talk with you. We're talking about triple talk. That man right there sat on my porch. I talked to you in the meeting, and I'm going to repeat what the numbers are. That's the reason that individual back there uses 8 feet. You and I had a conversation about the RV park. Mm-hmm. When I went over the RV park and I took a swag at it, I said that I feel they're at least 8 foot over by the freeway, flooded. You told me then 5 foot. Nancy then went, or had been in conjunction, and she can speak for herself, but it was my understanding that you came back here and said that they were 2.5 foot somewhere around floor level. You're now lowering that down. My question to you is, anybody that's got half a brain can drive down the road out here and see the elevation of this church is much like it is at the RV park. Plus, every map you have presented, you sent to me and you presented to all these individuals, has a blue color on it. Mm-hmm. That blue color has, in my particular case, and I can only talk about mine, and that is, I'm at the edge of the floodplain, and you have told me that that over in North Lodge, the base flood elevation was 6284. And the blue has no elevations, no way to figure out, like the lady over here, Joe, asked about how she lives next door to me. She wanted to know how much water's on her land. Well, I heard you earlier in this presentation say something to the effect that you got data down to elevations down to 2 feet. And I'm assuming 2 feet, but if it's not 2 feet, if it's 3 feet, I don't care. Why in the world didn't your maps show elevations of everybody's property and then show the flood elevation so that Joe doesn't have to, she's gonna go out of this meeting having no clue what you're saying. And if you put out the maps properly and did the proper job, and you, the county, should be doing it because he is being paid by you. And that's the sad part. Anybody that's got a 6th grade education could subtract 2 numbers on their own property and figure out how much water is on their property. And you did none of that. Okay. And you're not, right now, you're not giving the people.
You've made your point.
The real information.
Thank you, Larry. You made your point. We have to get Adam out of here for his birthday party. So we're done with comments from the audience. Is it quick?
It's very quick.
Do I have to make you stand? No.
I just want to ask, so you're saying the maps are predicting a 1%, 1 to 10% chance of a...
It's a 1%. It's a storm that has a 1% chance of occurrence in any given year, of being exceeded or equaled in any given year.
So we're being asked to pay for flood insurance that has a 99% chance of not happening? Is that correct?
It's a 1%, yeah, correct.
Wow, okay, thank you.
That's the regulatory flood.
You got something in about 30 seconds?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
So we're going to raise prices on a 1% chance. That's what you just said, right?
Raise prices on insurance, flood insurance?
Sure.
Well, is that what you're asking?
Well, I'm trying to get at is we're going to have a price raise somewhere, right? Okay.
Only if you're going to be looking at flood insurance, and the reality is, the short answer to that question is it won't make any difference now.
And you don't have a solution.
The new Flood Risk 2.0 National Flood Insurance Program insurance is issued on an actuarial basis, and it's independent of what your flood elevation is, whether you're in a flood zone, whether you're not in a flood zone, any of it.
And do you have a solution
to
this flooding problem?
That's part of what the next steps are.
Okay, so you're going to raise prices. Well, this is going to raise prices, and it's going to devalue properties. How am I supposed to, my problem is with this is when I die, my son's going to inherit this house, okay? That's what we're banking on because the economy going like this. I don't know what's going to happen when he gets to college. Are we going to price out families out of Munds Park because of this? More families have moved into Munds Park because Flagstaff's getting priced out. More families have moved into Flagstaff in the last 2 years, or Munds Park in the last 2 years. Are we going to be priced out again?
I don't know how to answer that question other than to say, you now know what your flood risk is.
All right, listen. Did you want to speak, Adam? Adam, are you speaking?
Sure, I can close it out. We're not realtors, so that's not our that's not what we're here to do. That's not what no, that's not what I meant. That was a slip. It's not, I didn't mean it. It's not what our job here was to do.
Please let him speak, all right? Thank you.
Correct. But the problem is we have to have the maps first, and now we can look for solutions.
But we need the money to pay for it first. We can't pay for anything if we're getting priced out.
Well, let me try, okay? Let me go back and let me work with the staff, and we'll try to find money. That's what we'll try to do. Does that make sense? I have to know what the problem is, and then the board can have everyone staff it, and then we can look for solutions. We have to know what the problem is to find a solution. That's where I come in.
If I may close this up.
I got a question. Sorry, I was gone for a little bit.
Oscar, are you sure you want to talk?
Oh, yeah. Hey, whoever's got ears, let them hear.
No idle threats, all right?
All right.
So I wasn't here for part of the meeting, but the question I have is, if the I-17 was not there, would that affect the now current floodplain map?
You're asking if you just upped and removed I-17 gone completely?
Let's
and
say-
this reverted back to the natural?
Natural, yep.
It would certainly have an effect. I
Okay.
don't know what, but it would certainly have an effect because you're substantially changing the physical attributes of the entire area.
So, so that was the question I had, was if the I-17 wasn't there, it would have affect the new proposed floodplain map that it's not your department, it would be ADOT's department then at that point?
Well, ADOT will have the responsibility for anything that happens on ADOT right away and in their stuff, yes. That doesn't mean that there couldn't be cooperative work, but that's a question that the county has to pursue, and that's.
Okay,
Probably shouldn't say
our
anything
audience is shedding, so we need to close this off. One thing, I think the problem, being a Munds Park property owner since 1968, full-time resident for the last 20 years, and having hosted my community watch meetings when we've listened to Lucinda talk about, well, we got the maps from FEMA, but we don't like them, so we sent them back. We've listened to 12 years of that. Why now has FEMA dropped the hammer and said, you got to do it, this is it, no more? That doesn't make sense to us, doesn't make sense to me. I'm sure it doesn't make sense to you guys. Second, you referenced a cost of $60,000 to do the whatever has to be done.
Million.
60 million, I'm sorry. How can you put a value on the ability to flush your toilet, to have the fire department respond to the 911 call, et cetera? How can you place a value on that?
Well, that's a great question. The reality is that all of those factors can be taken into account when you start. You got to identify the project that works first. Let's get a project that works. Now, let's assess the ability to access. All of those things come into play. They all come into that they fill that benefit side of the benefit cost analysis, right? Those all stack up. And if that stack of benefits, including lives, is something that we have to look at, you have to add into that the ability to not be able to get out of here. That's a significant thing.
Heck, my
you
life
have
is
your one and only shelter that's now underwater. That's a significant thing. So
I place a value in my life of 60 million. So
I'd say-
where do we go? Where do we go from
if
here?
you can convince the grant writers that approve those checks,
Well,
let's
again-
do it.
Again, we've seen the county and FEMA hit the shuttlecock back and forth for 12 years. Let's go one more year. Delay this for what's the difference? What's the difference? You're trying to tell us, I'm sorry guys, you have to buy flood insurance. So if you didn't tell us that now, tell us in a year from now with a new study, what difference does it make?
'Cause
And
we
let's
have to
try
give-
and get the flood reduced first.
The county doesn't have the ability to pull that plug. That it's in the FEMA process and moving through the FEMA process. That got initiated very clear back in 2011. It's just been a back and forth. And now we just don't, we appealed when we could because it made sense. There's nothing left to appeal because there's nothing left to change right now.
After all the commentary you heard today, you don't feel there's a reason
Oh,
to
no,
delay
there's
this?
plenty of, hey, listen. I empathize greatly with the idea that this is a shocker. And I guarantee you, I understand from the idea that everything west and north, where the old floodplain was, is a real shocker. I get it. I get that that's not it. The challenge is, the risk has been identified. FEMA's process is working forward. You don't You can't just stop that process
Well, you have for 12 years.
by an appeal.
Throw it back. Throw it back
With what?
again. What's
With-
one more year?
With what? No. We have to, you have to have the technical validation and reason why it goes back.
That doesn't even make sense, because you're asking a bunch of lay people to put in engineering data to get an appeal. You're like, here, you have 90 days to appeal, but, oh, by the way, you have to have an engineering degree. Otherwise, we're not going to listen to you. Not even logical, not even, that's just insulting to even say, here, appeal it. But you're not smart enough, so you're screwed. That's what you're saying.
It sounds like we need to be talking to FEMA instead of you. And I don't think FEMA is going to empathize with us. They're this giant organization far away in Washington, D.C., and they don't care about me.
All right, we're bringing this to a close, Adam, so you can go if you want.
Thank you, sir.
But-
So I agree with you, sir.
Let me mention one thing.
Okay.
So that way you can put the mic down and run. At my community watch meeting on May 16th,
16th.
we Linda used to handle flood stuff as part of Public Works. And then you split off and made a new district. So I've had Public Works, the main people on my agenda, every meeting. I have a complete separate item for flood control district people. You are invited to that meeting. I need to know if you're going to be there or not. Bring as many people as you want, all right? Now, you got to remember that format is an hour and a half town hall format where people can ask questions, but you're limited to around 10 minutes maximum, because I have 8 different agencies that will be there. But you are invited. Just let me know.
It's working.
Hello. Let me know if you're going to be there. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Sure. There's nobody here? Sorry, but the whole point of this whole entire meeting was for us to stand up for the community and to submit our own appeal, our own comments to FEMA. That's what this was all about, because this is depressing. It really is. This is heartbreaking. This is devastating. But you can get involved by getting a hold of FEMA yourself. You have to, this is where John Carr has to talk to you real quick to tell you the process. Because I've already sent my appeal. He knows how it works. You know, at least you're not one person, Steve. You're many people, you know? So it's all we got.
John, can you help us?
I've already submitted, and we just need to get everybody involved.
The appeals go to, Supervisor Vasquez, and I give you his email address, jvasquez@coconino.az.gov. Yeah, sorry. Okay. Okay.
Thank you. Can I ask a little, okay?
Go out on social media, so what platform you have is going to be on?
Is it V-A?
Yes, we're all going to work together.
Okay, yeah. And the only thing I ask you is the reason I came here was what? So I could get your input, not to make promises here, and not to tell you I was going to do something here, not to tell you I was stop. I need to know what you guys have, and then let me take it back and work it. That I asked for time. Can I have that time to help you? This is my community too. I came back to Flagstaff after everything, and I want to help you. Believe that. I want to make sure everyone is safe. And I'm here for you. I'll talk, my son's already there, so. But does that make sense? I thank you, sir. I love your passion, 100%, and I hope.
22nd or the 24th is the deadline. What are you going to be able to do between now and then?
Let me find out Monday. Let me ask all these questions Monday.
Please email.
Sure.
Please email.
That's what I'm going to try to do. I'm going to try to tell him.
You got it.
That's all I got. Thanks.
This is the first meeting?
They put it in the middle of winter.
Okay, get out of here, Adam. Get to your party.
this whole thing was set up that way.
Yeah, we had a county supervisor meeting with Windmill Ranch Resort, and I think we had like a 48-hour notice while the other developers had millions of dollars in lawyers to figure it out. That's how it was.
This meeting is officially closed, people. We are done. We're done.